Folks, welcome back to the Crossing Swords podcast presented by Batavia Downs Gaming and Hotel. And happy St. Patrick's Day to all that celebrate. And if you're lucky at home, I am lucky because I am joined by two phenomenal guests. Let me bring our first guy into our panel. A guy that needs zero introduction, VC3. Vinnie, how you feeling today?
I feel all right. I admit that amidst recent Sabres news, it's been an interesting last 96 hours or so.
It has been interesting. And speaking of interesting, you either love him or you hate him. Maniac, welcome to the program. How are we feeling today on this beautiful St. Patrick's Day?
Very divisive for my fan base. Shout out them all there. Shout out all six of them. Super excited. I will say my Sabres, pulse is a little bit more numb than it's been or that I would like it to be. But still excited to talk, and it's always good to beat Jack Eichel, plain and simple.
Yeah, I mean, that last game against Vegas kind of threw me for a loop, with all things considered, with Sabres going down, find a way to win at the end, and just has been craziness. But fellas, speaking of crazy, it's been 4 games since the NHL trade deadline. Things were a little bit hectic out in the Saberhood. Dylan Cousins gets moved. There's a ton of knee-jerk reactions. It's been 4 games. We've seen a little bit from the guys that Sabres brought in, Dylan Cousins now in Ottawa. Maniac, if you want to get things going, how are you feeling? We've seen a little bit of hockey since then. Cousins is a point per game guy. Norris is injured. How are we feeling?
It's like it would hurt a lot more if I hadn't seen this movie before and if I hadn't gone through this pain. The hockey gods give their toughest battles to their strongest soldiers. So as far as they're concerned, Sabres fans must be like all, country bodybuilders, where I guess we're all Arnold Schwarzenegger, because no fan base should have to go through this. I could lament on and on, but do I expect Dylan Cousins to pan out and ultimately become the player we were dreaming of him being when we signed him for $7 million a year? No, I do not. But the early returns are obviously a little bit devastating, VC3. It's hard to keep a chin up.
Yeah, and that's true. And again, I've said this before, and I'll say it again, just so I guess I can't get accused of flip-flopping back and forth. But ultimately, I do think that to a certain extent, this is okay in a bubble. If this was the only instance of that happening, you'd be willing to look at it and say, yeah, it was a professional athlete who was in a system/situation that just didn't really work for him for whatever reason. And they went to a different team with different line mates and different coaching staff and a different organizational philosophy. And it's a chance to reset and put yourself in different positions. And ultimately, said individual found themselves more successful. And I think in a vacuum, that would be okay, because ultimately, Buffalo or Toronto or San Jose or Minnesota isn't going to be a perfect place to play NHL hockey for every single NHL player. Just not everyone's going to succeed everywhere. But with that said, again, now it's another situation of a Sabres player among the many seemingly not finding success in a blue and gold uniform, and then going and immediately finding seemingly sustainable success elsewhere. And it's a marquee player at that we invested in and assumed would be the long-term future. And Cousins, unfortunately, was not, because for a while, he was really fun to watch and a fan favorite for good reason. And ultimately, I'm not rooting against Dylan Cousins, the individual, or Dylan Cousins, the athlete. It's mostly just people saying, well, we hope Dylan Cousins, the former Sabre, isn't succeeding, because it means that, again, Buffalo has done something wrong. Whether that's the case or not, of course, is, up for that debate, but it stings because it's just another instance of almost history repeating itself.
And it's great because he didn't go cut through 2 defenders and go top shelf over a goalie's glove. Right? He scored a goal with all due respect. I think VC3 could have scored that goal to win the game. With that said, it doesn't make it hurt any less. And obviously we'll have to see what happens in weeks to come. But again, a week after the Casey Middlestat trade last year, we were like, oh my God.
He's sweating at practice.
Here comes Captain America. He's sweating at practice. It's crazy. And now a year later, he's not even on the Avalanche. So yeah, we'll have to give things some time to breathe. It's just tough. It's not easy being a Sabres fan in these streets.
No, it's just, we see it year after year. And I mean, I think it's the case with Cousins. Everyone's on the same page. That move needed to happen for the Sabres. If that's not an original idea or thought, it's just whether Dylan Cousins is going to be able to keep that edge to his game in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, in a year from now, where I think we see it every time where a guy gets moved, he gets a little bit of that boost. It just sucks. And the part I'm more upset at is you trade for a guy who's had injury history and he's injured 3 games into his tenure here in Buffalo. Like, that's the part that sucks. How do you, I don't know if it's that bad. I don't know how you pull the trigger there, but I guess we'll see what happens, gentlemen. And I think a big talk recently was Rasmus Dahlin. He becomes le GM, goes LeBron James, talks to Kevin Adams. Biz Nasty has an absolute circus online talking about Sabres fans. Dahlin's asking for a trade. Friedman kind of clears it up that Dahlin just wants to know what the direction's going. End of the day, he's happy with things. How do you feel about Dahlin, like, taking that step of that ownership of the organization a bit more? He's the captain, and he wants to see, it seems like he's happy with the direction things are hopefully going here in Buffalo.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Right. I'll say this. I think it's not unreasonable for him to do that. And I think ultimately the way that the landscape is, in 2025 in professional sports, you want your captain, you want your number one player to be involved, I think, more than you want, regular Joe Schmo being involved. I mean, we hear and I know this is going to come into the discussion later, but on the flip side of the coin, how much Josh Allen is involved is doing mock drafts because he loves it. And Bills fans find that endearing. And Brandon Beane talks about how kind of funny it is but he likes to be involved, and they have healthy conversation, which is great. So on that side of the coin, you obviously want that. And then similarly, I think I don't know. I guess it's reassuring maybe to say that Dahlin came out of it satisfied with what the vision is of the franchise. But I also don't know. I think Joe DiBiase said this. Of course he was going to say that he's satisfied with the vision, because if he says he's not, then what is that? What frenzy does that kick up, right? But ultimately, I think it's I guess a good thing. And then whether that vision plays out will be seen, because of course there's a plan. Ultimately, I don't know, with the exception of the tank years, maybe we can put an asterisk by them. I don't know that there was a Sabres owner, GM, coach, left winger, whatever, that was wishing the team to not succeed. I think ultimately everyone's always this plan is we will win with this plan. And, for one reason or many, some of them have not worked over the years. So I think that's the ultimate thing, is just because the plan sounds good, it just there's less and less reasons as time goes on to feel confident that any plan is going to work, because so many of them seem like they don't here for whatever reason.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it, but it just ain't easy being a Sabres fan in these streets right now, because you hear the news about Dahlin and it's no, I don't want our captain and our GM quarreling or disagreeing. But at the same time, the point that Dahlin, I guess, or Biz was trying to say that Dahlin would make is the one that many Sabres fans agree with. And they're not happy with the direction of the organization. They want some kind of course correction. So then immediately you're well, am I more upset if this happened, or am I more upset if this didn't happen? It was just very bizarre. At the end of the day, I think that there was probably a lot of truth to it. I think that even though Biz kind of had to walk it back, essentially, and Dahlin said flat out no, of course there was probably a meeting between Dahlin and Adams, and at some point Dahlin probably said to Biz yeah, I'm pissed, and then it's not crazy for Biz to then go on Spittin' Chicklets, which is basically much more casual format, and just be well, yeah, Dahlin's pissed, he's a superstar, he's a top 20 player in the league. If he's not happy, then he's gonna want to move the hell out of there.
Yeah, if he's going to that meeting,
it just doesn't take much to leap. So it's a crazy world where that was kind of wrong for a little bit, but that's probably exactly what happened in layman's terms. So we'll see what happens, but it's just I hate to say it, it's just tough. It's just tough because there's if you're a Sabres fan, you want to focus on them being I hate to say it, even 7 points out right now with 2 games in hand on three of the teams, just some bullshit that you can actually focus on. Instead, it's where is the next water leak? Where is the next area of this very delicate and fragile situation gonna splinter? And what was once something I loved is gonna get even worse.
Yeah, it's I think anyone who expect Darlene to go in that conversation, and if Kevin Adams said the exact opposite, for him to be happy, I think would be an asinine thing to think. Why would you want your captain to be happy with a 5-year rebuild if Adams want to go that direction? Like, if I'm Darlene, I would be pissed too. I don't want my captain, my young player, to be happy where things are at right now. Hopefully he's part of that change, because I've been the firm believer of this organization is going to change culturally. It's going to be the young guys taking the reins in the locker room, outside of it, and making it their own. Ideally, that's in the right way. So hopefully we're going to start seeing that kind of happen through. And Maniac, you brought up leaky boats earlier. There's been a ton of negative national media spotlight on the Buffalo Sabres. It was the ESPN game a couple weeks ago where Ray Ferraro absolutely ripped the Sabres to shred right before the deadline. We had the ESPN article a couple of days ago. The Athletic put out their, grades from fans, from the Athletic people, grading ownership. Sabres come dead last in ownership from fans' perspective, from the Athletic perspective. Is this whole, negative attention on the Buffalo Sabres, on the ownership, do you think that's going to be helpful in terms of getting any sort of change and kind of killing that maybe lackadaisical look that I think a lot of fans and people in Buffalo maybe see towards ownership, towards management at all? We got a mute monster out of Maniac.
I sadly will say no. And the reason I have to do so is just basically, they said for the longest time, like to get negativity to affect them seems impossible regarding the Sabres, whether it's, fans being like discontent with the state of the arena or the state of the team. I mean, anything like that. But you look at the overall argument. Well, the one thing that writers or whoever it is always says is, well, you should stop watching or you should stop going to the games. Like, that's a tangible thing that would actually affect them and change them. I look at the years of between when Pegula took over the team in 2011 and 2018, the average attendance for the Sabres game was over 18,500 people for all of those years. So you're basically talking about a full arena almost. Mm-hmm. Now for the last 3 years, it has gone up, but it's 15.5, it's 15.9, and it's 16.0. So you're talking about 15 to 20% down from those numbers. If that hasn't gotten their attention at this point, I mean, I assume it has. I have no choice but to believe they're seeing graphs where they're losing money, they're not retaining customers, and they're seeing that. But to wrap back to it, like, I don't think national media does anything, because if those overall numbers that are hitting their business aren't doing anything, they're seeing in the straight data, what good is a couple of opinions going to do?
Yeah, I think that's very reasonable. And you can't assume that that's not seen. I mean, there are enough people that are in any given NHL organization that are aware of these trends, right? Because ultimately, we've said this a lot of times. Well, everybody said this a lot. I mean, it is a business. Hockey is a business. The players say that when there's trades and free agency decisions and releases and signings. And so, yeah, like in the business model of hockey, you're going to assume that a front office is going to notice those trends. And I guess I don't know at all, like, why maybe more hasn't been able to be accomplished to maybe start turning some of those trends in the other direction. And I think the reason ultimately is, and I know I've said the word ultimately like 6 times today, but winning fixes everything. In almost every situation, winning fixes everything. And I just think there's not enough winning right now to fix the things that, even if there was a little bit more winning, you could like put some attention into and turn that around.
100%.
It just does, like, eventually there's enough losing that it's like nothing else matters. And so therefore there's nothing, like if the Sabres were not as a perennial non-playoff team as they have been, the new Jumbotron would be like a cool thing. It'd be like, oh yeah, hey, like this is neat. But like now it's an ironic piece of information. And like the new roof is an ironic piece of information where that shouldn't be the case. That's like actually good things that are happening, but we're not giving them the attention, the right attention. Like they're getting attention, just the discourse around them is more for, maybe more for the wrong reasons, I think.
I mean, if a train wreck's like going off the track, but you have like the cook is like perfectly preparing a meal in the dining car, like, does it fucking matter? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Like that's what's happening though. Like so
Organizing the deck chairs on the Titanic.
It's exactly the deck chairs. It's exactly like, again, credit to them. They are trying to do these. Even if you've been to the arena like the last year or two, the experience is notched up from where it was in years prior. They're definitely doing a lot more tangible things to try and get fans involved. But you said it best, Vinny. I mean, it's just like at some point there has to be some sustained winning. I mean, I think when Sabres fans get like a 3-game win streak, it's like they're like, Scrooge McDuck, like diving through the gold coins. Like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it is crazy. So, again, just not enough winning to help the other things they're doing. Nothing is moving in sequence to get them out of that rut.
Yeah, I mean, the money they spent on that Jeff Skinner Memorial Jumbotron, they could have put toward their internal cap and probably made a lot more money than that Jumbotron is ever going to bring into that arena. And it's just, I mean, it's crazy. We see it with the Bandits, like a league where a team, Georgia, had 3,000 fans at a game a couple weeks ago, is drawing more numbers than the Buffalo Sabres are in the same arena. Like the Bandits are selling out home game. Banditland is a blast. People like seeing winning.
Maybe I'll say this,
Yeah.
to a certain percentage of that, and I guess we're calling it a Jumbotron. I don't know if it's actually a Jumbotron, but it's kind of like a video board because it might be like Decktronics or whatever. But my point is, a certain percentage of that video board is for the Bandits, right?
Oh,
so like,
yeah.
I guess like the separate, like on the Banditos podcast, you could say, hey, this new video board's great. Like we see Josh
video
way
board.
higher quality than we used to, So like that's worth something. But I will say that, and yeah, and Maniac, you said it. Like the experience in arena is better than it was, let's say 4 years ago at this time. It has evolved, and I feel like maybe the game presentation department doesn't get enough credit for the Sabres because they are fighting an uphill battle, and that like fans like just sort of resent the losing and therefore maybe take it out on the experience, whereas there are a lot of people working hard to try to make experience enjoyable, and they have done there's tangible results that we've seen that lately.
I went to a spa recently with my girlfriend. It was freezing. We went to this like hot tub. There were all kinds of kids jumping in the hot tub. The sauna like had a hole in it, and the room we stayed in, the walls must have been paper thin. I heard people running in the hallway all the time. But you know what? It was a winning experience with my girlfriend. We all had a winning time overall. So I was able to overlook those little things. Like I didn't give a shit. Like it was a nice, happy time. Winning solves everything, BC3. You said it best.
Yeah, and I know fans are upset at like the arena presentation or whatever. We look at the Bills right next door. We're acting like the Ralph is some sort of megapolis of luxury and great times. Like winning solves everything.
Winning does solve everything. Dude, you can't even get chicken wings at a Bills game. I'm sorry. Like, tell me where I'm wrong to be upset about that.
Absurd.
That's a fair point. Yeah.
And by the way, just a quick point on the Banditos too. Average attendance last year was 14,800. The Sabres were at 15,900. I mean, crazy.
Insane.
Crazy.
I'll be in attendance when the Bandits take on the Desert Dogs this Friday night.
Those dogs are about to get deserted.
It's I admit, so we're not. I don't know. I'll insert myself as a special guest on this week's Banditos episode. We don't need to get into Bandits discussion here, but I admit my rooting interests aren't maybe as much in black and orange as they usually are.
Whoa.
Okay.
Well, speaking of rooting interest, fellas, we have 17 games left of this wonderful Sabre season. Obviously, last place in the East. Why are you, watching the Buffalo Sabres right now? I think fans have a bunch of different reasons. Some just love hockey. They love the team live or die. Some sickos out there love to hate watch this team. Where do you kind of fall in that spectrum of 17 games? Are you looking to build towards next year? Like, Vinny, where are you at right now with the Sabres on your TV screens?
I'll probably watch the Sabres mostly because I like hockey and I like the sport of hockey. And at my core, and even in a more surface level interaction, I do love the organization. Like that's the reason that I do a lot of the things I do in my life is because of my growing up in this area and rooting for them since I was able to consciously acquire thoughts. But I think also there's the part of it that's looking to see what pieces I think I like so that when we do this over the summer in the off season, I can say, look, I saw with my eye test, this person doing this thing and I liked, or, I actually didn't really like when, the Sabres would do this. I mean, I remember that a couple of years ago, they had like a power play breakout. I think it was under Ralph Kruger that I just hated. And so like I acquired that information. So to a certain extent, I'll be watching the games to acquire information and like opinions. And also just to watch hockey because this level of sports, this is a fun time of year for sports. And so like those Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays that that March Madness is now happening on like Monday and Tuesday night, because the NHL is like a Tuesday night league for whatever reason. It's like, oh, I'm craving watching live sports. Like, yeah, all right, opportunity to go watch the Sabres game.
Yeah, the easiest way for me to like quantify like what I'm watching, it's like 2 years ago when Ilya Lyubushkin walked in shorthanded in overtime and buried, like my heart like spilled into the rest of my body. Like I was like, oh my God, like this is the team that's going to break the drought for sure. Like what a moment of destiny. The Gummy Bear scores on the road. Now, like if Connor Clifton just stayed on the bench when he was supposed to come out for his shift, I wouldn't even care. I wouldn't. Yep. It wouldn't move my needle one bit. All that I care about for the Sabres is it's all very binary things. I just want to see Tage score a lot of goals. I'd like to see Quinn like play consistent, but even like I think we all know he could like probably play well for like 17 games. So it's tough to like be like I'm going to put a lot of stock in that. I would hope nobody gets hurt. And that I hope like our goalies just play well. Like I don't even know if Devin will get called up at this point or if he's just going to be in Rochester again for the rest of the year. UPL I think has been better. Like I hated that he let in that dribbler against Vegas late, because that's just like I feel like if they had won that game 3-2 in the shootout, would have been a little bit more of a confidence builder. But yeah, so that's where I'm at on this team. Just watching a couple of binary things, and Tage score a lot of goals. Go Tage, go Tage, go Tage.
Yeah, I mean Tage scoring I think makes everyone happy. I think I might fall in that more sicko kind of category with watching the Sabres at this point, where I feel like I'm kind of banging my head against the wall a lot of times, where I think we all see moments of, oh, Tage scored the sick goal, Dahlin's incredible, UPL made an incredible save, like whatever it is, like, oh, this is good, this is fun, this is why I enjoy hockey. And then you maybe watch either, not throw guys out, but, Beck Malenstein shift that makes you want to rip your hair out. Sam Lafferty does something really dumb. Like the Sabres just do a lot of things that cost them games, which I think from my perspective just makes me frustrated. But that Vegas game, for example, is the reason why we still watch. We still have fun, where, in a very emotionally invested game, they find a way to basically pull a rabbit out of their ass and win it. And I guess that's just the point we're at. And with that 17 games left, fellas, like, there's obviously been guys that have taken maybe a step back this year, or maybe haven't been to the level we wanted. And I think these last kind of games here are a good chance for maybe management, I think fans too, to kind of maybe get one last like look at a guy before they make a big investment. Obviously, Peterka is going to be an RFA this year. There's a whole conversation there. Quinn as well. Talk like, what are there any guys that maybe are kind of on like a little bit of a you're watching a little closely, see if they can find their game again before the season's over and done with? I don't know, Vinny, if you have anyone in mind.
I think Luukkonen might be one, and like he and Quinn, I feel like are easy answers to that question because they're the most marquee names. But yeah, I would really like to see Luukkonen develop some consistency and maybe develop some, like, I don't want to use the word like dominance, but like I would like for him to be a top 15 starting goalie in the NHL a little more consistently. I know he is capable of that and has been that. And then obviously with Quinn, it seems like he hasn't found it as of late. And I don't want to see him fall into a similar path to Cousins, because it's just, he's another player that I know has talent and I know has that potential. And when Quinn and Cousins and Peterka were playing on the same line, that was really fun to watch. And we thought that was going to be a line that like grew together. Like they had they made some mistakes and they had an experience and they were light and fast and they couldn't really grind out wins themselves. And so I just assumed, hey, that'll come with time. And then now, next year at this time, we may be sitting here saying that none of them are on the team, or maybe just Peterka is still here, or maybe just Quinn. And that's a future I did not expect. So I would like to see Quinn play his way into a role that we're happy to see. I'm sure I want him to be happy with it too. And then the other portion of that is I would like to see Owen Power prove some people wrong at the end of the year is I think my other thing.
Yeah, I mean those are big names. My biggest thing with Luukkonen, I think last year, not to get too deep into the trenches on goalie talk, but he was so composed, so in his crease. And this year, I mean, we see the screenshots of him way out of his net, doing this, that, and the other. Like that's where he gets in a ton of trouble. Hopefully, we can see some progression there for him. And honestly, like this is a bigger conversation, probably not for today, but Sabres coaching has been a forefront of talk on the Great Place of Sabres Twitter, whether that be the set that per power play being really bad, the penalty kill being atrocious, like even guys of like we say all the time of Sabres guys finding success elsewhere. And I think that comes down to like your head coach not getting guys, into that mindset to prove people wrong, where just because a guy goes to a different team doesn't mean he's going to put the pieces together. I think you should be able to find that out here, but I don't know, Maniac, if there's any other guys you're talking or thinking about these last 17 games that you want to see.
No, VC3 covered it perfectly. I'm just lamenting over my UPL, all the confidence we got last year. Just like everyone said, it kind of has like a little struggle city this year. I'm looking at a graphic that we posted last year on March 16th. It said that since January 1st, UPL was first in goals against average, first in save percentage, and first in shutouts with 4. He had a 932 save percentage and a 1.87 goals against average over a 75-day period last year, where he was third in the NHL in games played. So he played a lot of games and he was playing very well last year. I think that, like if you get a Devin who's supposed to be an alpha, like UPL, and I know that people are like, well, now you're paying $5 million for a backup. Well, that's why the beauty of having someone like Devin that you still have under relatively cost control for another year, and seeing where that goes. But I don't know. It's very funny. UPL is almost like that workplace harassment meme that I love bringing up. When UPL does something, it's like HR. And if Devin does like anything, it's like, oh my God, so sweet. Like, like it's just how it is. Like, so I don't know. I mean, I get it. Like UPL's like what, 25 now. So I guess we're writing him off already. But
yeah. Great.
I don't know. It just feels like having 2 goalies to be good is kind of a good idea in the NHL now.
Yeah, I mean, getting a goalie that's good is a luxury. And we saw it was there last year, and just shows how much he carried the Sabres last year, that he willed them to that point and had that great of numbers. Like imagine if he was just average last year where he's at now, like that team would have been really, really, really bad. So I guess we'll see what happens on that front. But tonight we have something a little interesting. We have some old friends. Sabres are playing Henry Jokiharju, Casey Middlestat, Sabres, Bruins, 7:00 tonight on MSG. Are you guys tuning in for this one? It's going to be weird seeing Middlestat, Jokiharju against each other or on the same team. 2, darlings of Sabres Twitter back in the day as well, those two. How are we feeling going in tonight against Boston, guys? Sabres are favorites, so -112 money line, I think they were at.
I know. I mean, both these teams in the dumpster compared to where they wanted to be at the beginning of the year. The only thing I'll say is you're crazy if you don't at least sprinkle on over Henry Jokiharju 0.5 point and over 0.5 point for Casey. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is a pretty heads up. I think right now, like on the NHL website, which imagine, I understand this is like as a 24-year-old, like saying this the way I'm about to say it, but imagine a decade ago saying, oh, on NHL.com, the DraftKings says the Sabres are -115 and the Bruins are -105, and so is only +110 to score a goal. That would be bonkers a decade ago. So I just want to say that because I don't know, maybe I'm a little more old fashioned, but I'm starting to get a little bit cautious about that inundation of like the official league stuff. Anyway, it is it seems like it's going to be like everyone expects this to be a pretty even game.
Yeah.
And I think it's 2 teams that like ultimately are going to make some mistakes, and they have made some mistakes this year. So late in the season, I'm interested to see who's playing for who and who's playing for what tonight. I agree with you, Maniac. I have a feeling I see like a Jokiharju assist and like the secondary assist, but it's just like, of course he had a point, and Middlestat scoring seems like an inevitability.
Yeah, and we have some interesting lines here today. Norris is out again with his injury. Great move to bring that. Peterka is also out for tonight. So we have some weird Rochester call-ups.
Great.
Kozak's back in. Murray's getting a look on the third line. And I guess just Vinny, we have some good things happening on the 90 in Rochester. Some guys getting some looks. So maybe some fans who aren't all that attuned to things happening in Rochester, maybe something they should know about these guys. We can kind of get into maybe some good news happening out in Amerks land.
I mean, there's a lot of good news happening in Blue Cross Arena. And I mean, Rochester is doing a lot of things well. Murray is a player who does basically everything. I mean, he's good at literally everything. And if he's in the AHL, I mean, he puts on a show by himself because he's like a guy who could get a Gordie Howe hat trick every single night. He's a goal scorer who's physical and plays good defense. So he's a player that is fun to watch in and of himself. And Roseanne, who isn't right now in the lineup tonight, he is 10th in points in the AHL right now. And is having an incredible season. So those are their two main guys in terms of offensive output. But I mean, they have a couple other players that are really putting on a show in their own way. Zach Metza is 9th in points by a defenseman in the AHL, and Cale Clegg is 11th. So you have two guys who are contributing on offense regularly. I admit when the organization signed Metza, I was actually pretty excited because I'd watched him play at Quinnipiac and thought he was a good player. And he has translated his game well to the AHL. And I liked Cale Clegg. Cale Clegg's one of my Sabres depth defensemen that I always really liked and wish they stayed in the NHL, even if they maybe weren't great every game. Clegg is 11th in points per game or points by a defenseman. So that's impressive. Levi is having a great year. He steals them a lot of games. And I say that because, and it's ironic because they don't really need him to steal them a lot of games, but he does at times. They play a pretty high event brand of hockey. And so there's some times where there's a 3-on-1 going the other way and he makes 3 saves in a row. And then Rochester will get the puck, go down the other way and score with the fast break. So it's fun to watch. He's 6th in goals against average and in save percentage right now in the AHL. And that dipped a little bit over the last 3 weeks, as did Rochester in the standings, because they really drew the short straw on the schedule. Laval, which is right now in 1st in the AHL and 1st in the North, of course, but if you're 1st in the AHL, you're going to be 1st in your conference. Rochester's 5 points back of them, and so they're 2nd in the North at this point. Laval basically got, when we had that big snowstorm a couple weeks ago, it was almost exactly a month and a day ago. That was Rochester played 3 games in 3 nights. It was home, road, home. And then Laval played Wednesday night and then just traveled to Rochester to play on Sunday. And so it was, they got really kind of thrown to the gauntlet. And then they had another situation of that about 2 weeks ago. So schedule wise, that they were on tired a bit, and call ups, pull downs mess with their lineup. But they have a couple of other players that have been impressive. Number one, Nikita Novikov right now is 4th in plus minus for a defenseman. He's a plus 24. So he's silently incredible for them. And then ever since acquiring Eric Brandstrom, we talked about the trade deadline earlier, and I didn't really get a chance to bring him up. I mean, the guy is the best goal scorer on the team since joining the Amerks at the trade deadline. It's nuts. He's 1st in points per game by defenseman in the AHL right now.
Wow.
And 7th overall among all AHL players. So he's having quite a run with the Amerks since the Sabres got him at the trade deadline.
Yeah,
he's been
first round pick.
Yeah, I mean, he's got talent, and they're a fun team to watch. They put on a good show. It's an incredible environment there. That rink is awesome. I mean, if you want to watch fun hockey and just really live in that environment, I mean, Blue Cross Arena is an awesome place to be. And some other stats about the Amerks, since I'm just going to rattle them off here. They're 5th best in the power play, the 4th best home team in the AHL. So if you go to Blue Cross Arena, knock on wood, pretty good chance they're going to come home or be at home with a W. They get the 2nd most power play opportunities, which means A, they get to go on the power play and play exciting hockey a lot, but B, they're able to outplay teams. And when they do that, they draw penalties. Mm-hmm. And so that's one thing they're good at. The only area where they're maybe a little bit deficient on paper that's kind of easy to find is their penalty kills 15th. So it's halfway. They're not terrible, but that's one area that they I know would like to see a little bit more consistency is when they're a man down. But other than that, yeah, they're a good team and they're playing some fun hockey. So with 14 games left in the season, there's a lot of reasons to go watch some of the prospects in Rochester, because I have a feeling that's going to be some good hockey here coming down the stretch.
Yeah, and especially with obviously fans are obviously sick of prospect talk with Sabres, because I think we all expected guys here to be the answer. But next year, when you have a lot of holes, especially on the defensive side, and Vinnie brought up a lot of good guys, whether that be Brandstrom, Novikov, I mean even brought up Kelclag, but there's a lot of defensive prospects in Rochester who could make that jump. You have 14 games left in the season. For fans who maybe head out to Rochester to watch a game or catch it online, like, who are a couple names that they should, look out for, that they can be excited to watch, whether that be offense, defense? I always, Levi's in net. Who are maybe some big names?
Well, I mean, I did kind of already outline, like, Rosén and Murray offensively are fun to watch.
Yep.
They're both, Rosén is basically operating at a point per game right now. Murray is like points in 3 out of every 4 games.
Mm-hmm.
Lucas Rusek is the best forward in terms of assists. He's good he can dish the puck pretty well.
He looked good when he's in Buffalo.
So, I mean, he's exactly. So, like, that's a player that you've seen, look pretty good the NHL level, that has continued to have that vision grow in the AHL. Excuse me. Costa Helenius is actually plays a fun brand of hockey. I think he's maybe slowed down from the pace he had earlier this season, but in the late fall and through the winter, Helenius was, in my opinion, maybe their best player. Now, statistically, that wasn't necessarily the case, but I've really liked watching him play. And Noah Ostlund is another player that maybe doesn't have the points per game you would like to see, but it seems like when I'm there working these games, like, I'm looking at highlights, or like he's in like my shot on camera a lot.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of neat. And so that's me sort of eating my words a little bit, because between Rosén and Ostlund for a couple of years, I was like, well, the Sabres don't need both these guys. Like, we should try to trade one of them for Erik Karlsson or something, right? Well, I'm wrong. I have been wrong. And so I'm sorry, you guys are good at hockey, and I hope you stay on the Amerks, because you make watching those games fun. So I like watching him. And then throughout the roster, I mean, just to go back to defense, Jack Rathbone is fun to watch. He every once in a while steps into a forward from the other team in the neutral zone, and it shakes the place. And Rathbone's not a big guy, but I like watching Rathbone play defense. It's a fun brand of hockey. And every once in a while he steps in on offense too, joins the rush. I mean, that's the brand of hockey that Rochester plays. So those are some of the guys I like, and then I guess, I don't know, the other 17 on the roster, I can't say really anything bad about. So, but to those guys, and with that said, I mean, in all seriousness, it is like we talked about winning, solving everything. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Rochester winning makes it a lot easier to talk positively about them. But yeah, I mean, you can see just consistent returns on some of these players night in and night out. Because when I drive down there, I think, oh, like, I wonder how many points, Rosén's going to have today. I wonder how many guys Murray's going to hit. And he punched a mouth guard out of a guy's mouth the other day. That was awesome. That was so cool. So there's a scuffle in front of the net. It was just like jerseys pulling, and he and the guy like agreed after being in the bottom of the dog pile. He was like, you want to go? And the guy was like, okay. The guy like threw his glove off and looked up, and Murray just came right down on his chin, and his mouth guard went flying. It was awesome.
I love that. And I mean, Murray in the lineup tonight for the Sabres against the Bruins, 7:00 puck drop. Vinnie, I don't know if you have any final thoughts before we wrap things up here on the Crossing Swords podcast, sponsored by Batavia Downs Gaming Hotel.
I'm happy to see Murray get a shot. He deserves it. I think Rosén also deserves a shot. They've earned that. And I'm looking forward to watching some NHL hockey, because I love the sport of hockey. And then when ultimately Murray and Rosén return to Rochester, I'm hoping that whatever they learn being in the NHL, I know Murray's a little more experienced, whatever that may be, that they can put them and the Amerks in the playoffs for a while. And that whoever's watching this, if you want to watch good playoff hockey, buy some tickets, come down to Blue Cross Arena, and watch some fun hockey between the Amerks and whoever is the unlucky foe that will come to Rochester, New York when the weather gets better.
Yep. And hopefully they can bring back some good habits to Rochester, just like we all can bring some good habits to Batavia Downs Gaming Hotel. Folks, thank you for watching the Crossing Swords podcast. Sabres, Bruins tonight, 7 p.m. 17 games left in the Sabres season. Just like Vinnie said, we love hockey. That's why we watch it. And before we know it, there's not going to be anything on. Let's enjoy tonight. Watch a Rochester playoff run, because this is the Crossing Swords podcast, where sometimes our signals get crossed, but our swords always are. Let's go, Sabres.